Welcome to Frank Buckley Interviews. Tonight our guest is Nyesha Arrington, a chef whose multicultural roots spawned a restaurant, Native, that LA's top food critic says tastes like LA.
Frank Buckley Interviews starts now.
Nyesha Arrington says growing up with Korean and African American roots had its benefits and challenges. You were going back and forth between these two worlds as a child. What was that like?
Not easy. Not easy. It was very difficult, quite honestly. The sort of Korean side was not very passionate about like having these kind of mixed race kids, you know. So it was interesting times growing up and seeing that, but not understanding it, you know, and being next to my cousins who like don't look like me, you know, at all.
My conversation with Nyesha Arrington when we come back. Nyesha, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. I'm looking forward to talking all about Native and what's going on over there with your restaurant. But first, I want to talk about the two sides of you, because like you, I'm a Hapa. I have some Japanese blood in me. You have Korean blood in you. And tell me about that. When I was growing up, people would say to me, you know, what are you? Did you have that growing up?
Totally. It's an interesting conversation because, you know, I don't like appear Korean by like first glance, but yeah, it's something that runs deep in my veins from a food and cultural standpoint. It was the first thing that I really understood a people through food was through my grandmother. She spent a lot of time with me when I was like 4 or 5 years old, like cooking next to her, and I like would always kind of joke and say that's my first like chef job, but I was like peeling the garlic and eating amazing food, and it left such an impression on my palate. You know, I remember that years and years and years later, you know, so I'm always on like a constant pursuit to like evoke those feelings in other people.
And this is your Korean grandmother?
This is my Korean grandmother, correct.
And you were 5, right?
Yeah. I can remember it like it was yesterday. But, you know, honestly, like my entire family cooks, and my dad's roots are from Mississippi. He's an Angelino, but throughout the years growing up, I also had like gumbo and amazing like flavors like that. But food is just such a powerful conduit for culture.
Yeah. And I mean, it was for me as well, but it didn't prompt me to become a chef. Why did it push you in that direction?
Well, I truly feel that I was put on this planet to feed people. You know, it's my true purpose in life, and it is absolutely my life legacy. And the more I can share that with the world, the more I feel centered with myself. So restaurants are sort of one platform for that, and you know, as I grow and learn more about being chef and my field, I feel like there's amazing branches growing, you know, just about like sourcing and knowing the growers and knowing the hands that, you know, put the seeds in the ground and seeing these faces, and, you know, and that's really where I feel like you get a lot of the soulfulness in food.
Right.
Yeah.
I've read or maybe heard you in an interview in the past talk about the fact that you have in your pre-service routine, you ask the staff, where is the love?
I do.
In this dish?
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Oh, what a great question. Well, you know, every dish always has like nostalgia. I try to draw something from like childhood or something that is familiar, because I feel like, and I like to call it food data. I feel like in a world of tech, you know, in these like things where you're just scrolling through or you're looking at a screen, like, you know, when you can delve into a deeper meaning of what's in front of you, that's gonna like trigger something that's very powerful in the psyche. So for me, that's love, you know, and so there's always going to be nostalgia. There's always going to be something that's seasonal in a dish, and you know, that's really where the love is at, because, you know, and it might be different in every dish. For example, like you know, there's Alex Weiser, he grows these amazing potatoes, you know, and that might be the love in this like potato dish. You know, we have these seaweed like kombu potatoes that we have at the restaurant, and we say like, what is the love? And it's like, oh, you know, a person might say, well, Alex Weiser grew these potatoes and his family's farm in Tehachapi, and and go into that. And that offers a deeper meaning for the guest to understand what we're aiming to do. And that's celebrate people, like the human race. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it seems much deeper than there's some potatoes, throw them in the skillet, cook them, and eat them. Because that's how I cook.
Yeah.
But you're saying that's not how to create a loving dish.
Yeah. And that's what's really the true beauty in having like this brigade kitchen. I mean, my sort of like when I can sit on the line and see this sort of like team, everyone's just in this force, like creating the same thing, turning, plating, cooking and with intention. And that's what I love to cultivate. I never want people to, number one, dislike coming to work. I want people to enjoy what they do, because I feel like you can taste that. If you made a dish and you were not like super stoked about cooking it, or I didn't tell you why you were doing the things you were doing, or when you're adding the things that you're doing, you're just going to like do them because someone just told you to, without meaning and purpose. But if I tell you to slow roast, and this is why we're caramelizing these flavors, this is what happens in this effect, you're going to try to achieve that because you understand and you have a roadmap, right, to create. So I love that process. At home might be a little bit different. I'm generally eating like steamed rice and like kimchi and scrambled eggs half the time because
Really?
because it's really quick, and like my refrigerator honestly is like full of like condiments and like hot sauces and like sparkling water. Like that's because it doesn't go bad. I feel like whenever I buy food, like I rarely cook for myself unless I'm cooking for a big group where I have friends over. I love that. But like rice doesn't, it has a pretty good shelf life. Kimchi is like fermented, and eggs are just quick. So,
Right.
When I'm tired or when I wake up early, and you can have it for breakfast, lunch, dinner. So
Let me take you back to your grandma's kitchen when you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
And you realize that, wow, grandma cooks in a way that's different than at other places where I've been.
yeah.
Do you remember the first flavors that really struck you?
I do, and it was always she had this sauce called it's like dinjan, or like the gochujang sauce. But I remember making sauces with her, and always opening a refrigerator and like seeing like little glass jars or like house-made stuff. It wasn't like ketchup, mustard, mayo, like things I'd have at like school, or like even my mom didn't really cook a lot of traditional Korean. But
Was there any saran wrap between the
always,
top of the lid and
yeah,
the okay?
always. Yeah. She was very like disciplined mindset, very like
I say that because I've seen that
Yeah.
all growing up as well.
totally.
Yeah.
So I was always making that with her, and I just like was blown away by the fact that like, and I loved that she would make house-made kimchi and ferment it, and I always remember those smells very viscerally. But she'd always like use the sauce almost like a mother that you would use like in bread making. You have your starter, and she would always save some from the before and then like make a new batch.
And do you still, when you're cooking today, I mean, your menu at Native is not a Korean menu. It's not. I mean, I don't, how would you describe it?
Well, I have to say, I am becoming more comfortable using those flavors in a public format, because that's, 7 out of 10 times that's how I eat at home, because I love the feeling of it. But I am classically French trained, so, I kind of, the food at Native's very globally inspired. I've kind of taken inspiration from different chefs throughout my career, and whether it's like Ethiopian flavors. I worked with like Marcus Samuelson for a little while, and he very much inspired me on these amazing, just because he was so passionate about the culture and flavor, and it made me very passionate about it, and I learned and studied about it, and French cuisine I'm very passionate about, and Japanese flavors and North African, and everything can live next to each other on the menu when you have a common theme, which is seasonality. So it might be just influences, or a spice, or a technique. It's not like blaring like this is one dish that is not going to make sense next to this dish. It's really just cultural influences, and it's amazing how I sort of like thought about this, and in retrospect, because my first restaurant I wanted, I always want to be like setting the trend or ahead of the pack.
This was at Leona.
This was at Leona, correct. And I called it progressive California cuisine because it didn't exist. I was like, okay, what's gonna like say who I am as like a thinker and like, just roots. And I called it progressive California cuisine because I felt like I understood the lines of how to create and what to do, but then I wanted to like color outside of the lines and like just make my own fun thing.
Right.
And it was well received, and then I thought in opening Native, like, how do I approach that? Am I going to do the same thing? Like, what does that mean to open your second restaurant, your sophomore restaurant? And, so I thought I'll just sort of focus the lens and like draw from Los Angeles, and not just California, but what makes Los Angeles great is sort of this terroir that's multicultural. And how do I like create that through food,
I want to get back to that in a second, but I want to talk to you about your other side. We've talked about the Korean side and how that influenced you culinarily.
Yes.
What about the other side?
Other side, very passionate about my dad. He cooked a lot growing up. So while I spent like weekends and like Sunday dinners with my grandmother, the everyday sort of Monday through Friday, my mom and dad shared the cooking responsibilities and was an amazing cook. So I'd help him as well, and his like favorite, he would make very like American style food, but like he boasts that like he has the most like delicious spaghetti sauce. So, and it's true. But he loves cooking, and we'd go and like to my aunt's houses all over LA, and like they'd make like gumbo and like the filet gumbo specifically, which has become like a family legacy thing. And I've made that for them with like soft shell crab and introduced new flavors, and it's super amazing. So yeah, it's I just love that food can be part of family heritage.
Mm-hmm. And culturally, I don't want to make mass generalizations here, but culturally, Korean, African American, typically different. You were going back and forth between these two worlds as a child. What was that like?
Not easy. It was very difficult, quite honestly. The sort of Korean side was not very passionate about like having these kind of mixed race kids, so it was interesting times growing up and seeing that, but not understanding it, and being next to my cousins who like don't look like me, at all, and playing and getting sort of these like childhood memories.
I want to take you back for a second to what you mentioned before, Leona, your first restaurant, and how that ended. Because by all outward appearances, things were going great.
Yeah, that was and will always live in the hearts of many. That was my first restaurant, and the thing I dreamed about since I was like 7 years old. I always wanted to be in the restaurant business. It was one of the more difficult, challenging decisions that I had to make was to leave something that I like birthed essentially, and built a culture around, and it was very celebrated. And then to do the things that I wanted to set out to do was being received by someone off the street. That was like so amazing. And yeah, we had a great run.
And what happened?
Well, like just it's hard. I mean, with partnerships and businesses, it's sometimes you have different opinions on things and how they should be run, and I had to separate myself from things I didn't agree with, and so yeah, I mean, it was very difficult. I talked to my my partner, I suppose, and said I think I'm going to be leaving in a month, and that was it. And we closed.
And now you have Native.
And now there's Native.
And look at that smile as you talk about Native.
Yes.
And so how did you decide, here's what this one is going to be about?
Well, my artist brain was like telling me, like kind of like rearing and saying like, what does this restaurant feel? Like walk into a space and I'm kind of like thinking this esoteric weird thing. I'm like, tell me what you want to be,
Really? You literally walked in and said that?
Yeah, because, I feel like the restaurant, they're all like individuals. I'm not going to say like I'm going to do barbecue and put it in here, because it wouldn't translate if that's not the space. If it's so. How's the feng shui of the restaurant?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we have a smaller sort of kitchen and setup. So I said, like, what's going to work, menu size, and you kind of just like go through these layers of process, and then you kind of hone it. And I thought, I'm very passionate about like local produce and, global cuisine. So I called the last restaurant Progressive California Cuisine, and I thought, how do I celebrate Los Angeles on one menu? And I thought, oh, this multicultural thing can be harnessed by the thought of local produce and celebrating the growers. So that's been a big sort of like platform to work with having these amazing relationships forged over the last 15 years of like farmers and like artisans and cheesemakers and growers and the people, and celebrate them. And they're going to tell me like what they're stoked about this season, and, oh, this like legacy blueberry is like ridiculously amazing. Well, I'm going to probably make a dish, and that blueberry is going to tell me how it should be, prepared. So,
and I wonder, as a woman coming up in this incredibly intense world, is it different for a woman in that kitchen than it is for a man?
I think that's sort of a multifaceted answer. I think the person who's always going to be the fastest, the sharpest, the most anticipatory, like, it's going to, in theory, be the champion, right? And that's what drove me is like, if I work faster, if I work harder, if I work cleaner, like, I will thrive, and that was the mindset I went in every day. Mm-hmm. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that, like, the person next to me who potentially was male, like, would work slower, work less clean, and be like celebrated more, So
you saw that happen. That happened to you.
Yeah, totally. And so I have to say, like, on the other end of that, it's funny to have those same guys come back and ask me for jobs today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was very challenging. I probably like 9 times out of 10 was the only female in these kitchens. So I was very like headstrong about not asking for help, like always making things not, don't like lift. I would always like do everything myself, take out the trash, sweep the floors. It didn't matter. Like no job was too small for me or not my job, Mm-hmm. And yeah, I also was very like meticulous about what kitchens I chose to like be in, because there's different cultures in different kitchens, and some there's definitely an underbelly in the like hospitality field that is not healthy, so I think it's just about choosing who you kind of align with and what the focus is. But yeah, it was challenging at times for sure.
So what can be done about it? Yeah, I know that one of the stats that I've read is that less than 10% of the head chefs in America are female.
Well, I think that it's about creating healthy platforms for people to thrive in and be heard. I think people give up, because females especially, because a lot of times you're just not considered or heard or taken seriously. And, and not that it's like this huge cry for help. I think it's just like, it should be nurtured, because we're in a field where we nurture people every single day. And when you're at the top, like that needs to happen as well, mm-hmm. From that culture. So I think it's also just this like women feeling more comfortable about stepping into these roles of leadership, and it transcends gender, like just leadership from a standpoint of, I'll say it again, just nurture. I think that's very important, and that's from a mental state and from just labor. I think, quite honestly, I think that just on a bigger thought, that the restaurant industry, we need to shake it up a little bit, because the thought of business, it's very difficult. I mean, to think about on a plate of food, you're paying for everything, the food, the labor, the building, the lights, the water, with a plate of food, so people want value. They want, they want to receive perceived value, but they want organic, but they want, the story and all these things. So.
And they want to make sure we want to go and think, okay, everyone on the staff has health insurance
Yes.
and they're able to provide for their families.
Yes.
And I only want to pay $11
Yes,
for that.
yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So
And that's not possible.
it's very challenging. It's very, 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 very challenging. It's just kind of not possible. Yeah, it's very upside down. So we have to try to find new inventive ways to structure. And I think hopefully those percentages will start to shift, and it seems like it's heading in that light. I've been in the business 16 years now. And I have to say from day one to now, for sure, there's been leaps and bounds heading in the direction of celebrating female chefs. And I think there's just this new face that are being emerged in culture also, like Filipino food or all these new cultures are being celebrated. It's great. Yeah.
I want to end with this. Jonathan Gold reviewed Native, and he loved it. And he ended with a line that I know made you very happy. What did Jonathan Gold say?
Sir Jonathan Gold said that my food tastes like Los Angeles. And that, I have to say, it was like everything sort of coming to a head for me and setting me on a course of, the world is my oyster. And it's such an inspiring sentence because I was born and raised in this city. And saying that my food reflects that is, really an accomplishment,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
My thanks to Nyesha Arrington for sharing her life with us. If you'd like to hear the entire uncut version of our conversation, check out the Frank Buckley Interviews podcast. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts, including at the KTLA News app. And thanks for the terrific feedback on social media. I read all of your comments. If you'd like to leave one, I'm Frank Buckley TV on Twitter and Instagram, and there's a Frank Buckley Facebook page as well. And if you want to share the TV version of our show with a friend, we'll post it on YouTube too. Just search for Frank Buckley Interviews. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.